The storm had rolled in faster than expected. It wasn't supposed to snow until morning, but now, a full blizzard raged across the foothills of the Carson Range. Wind howled through the branches like a chorus of angry spirits, hurling snow across the valley in blinding waves. Miles from the nearest town, Eli trudged forward, head down against the biting gusts. His backpack pulled at his shoulders, and his boots sank deep into the powder. He was used to the cold, used to being alone, he preferred it that way. But something caught his eye through the swirl of white. A strange silhouette just off the trail. Not rock. Not tree. Something wrong. Eli's instincts kicked in. He made his way toward the shape, every step more difficult than the last. As he got closer, the outline sharpened, a vehicle, tilted unnaturally, half swallowed by snow and ice. The windshield was fractured, the front end twisted. It must have slid off the road hours ago. Eli brushed snow from the side window and peered in. His breath caught. A woman. Slumped across the driver's seat, her face barely visible beneath a cascade of frost-covered hair. Her skin was pale. Her lips a dangerous shade of blue. One arm hung limp, and blood from a small cut on her forehead had frozen in a dark line. "Hey," Eli shouted, pounding the glass with his gloved hand. "Can you hear me?" No response. He circled to the front, forced the half-crushed door with his multi-tool, and managed to wedge it open with a groan of bending metal. Cold air exploded outward. He crawled inside, checking her pulse. Faint, but there. "I've got you," he whispered. Without hesitating, he lifted her carefully into his arms. Her body was cold and unresponsive, but she moaned softly, just enough for Eli to know she wasn't gone. He cradled her against his chest and began the grueling half-mile trek back to his camp, each step a battle against the storm's fury. By the time he reached his tarp-covered lean-to, sheltered between two rocky ridges, he was trembling. He ducked inside, laid her on his sleeping mat, and immediately began stripping away her soaked coat. He wrapped her in dry wool blankets, added his thickest jacket, and activated the chemical heat packs he kept for emergencies. One behind her neck. Two under her arms. Another near her heart. Still not enough. Eli hesitated only a moment before removing his own coat and sliding in beside her onto the heavy sleeping bag. His body curled protectively around hers, sharing what warmth he had left. "It's okay," he murmured, lips near her ear. "You're safe now." Outside, the wind screamed like a wild thing. But inside the shelter, Eli focused only on her slow breaths. He rubbed her arms, whispered encouragement, and checked her pulse every few minutes. He didn't know who she was. Didn't know why she had been out here alone. But in that moment, nothing mattered except keeping her alive. Hours passed. She stirred faintly, whispering something incoherent. Her forehead was damp, but her fingers started twitching, life returning. When she finally opened her eyes, just for a second, they met his. Confusion, pain, gratitude. "You saved me," she breathed, barely audible. "Yeah," Eli said softly. "But you have to hold on. I'm not letting you go." The blizzard didn't let up that night. Snow piled against the tarp, and the temperature dropped below zero. Eli barely slept. He rationed what little food and water he had, melted snow over a flickering stove, and checked her every hour. Her name, her story, he didn't know any of it. But he knew that if she slipped away now, it would break something in him. By dawn, the storm began to settle. A pale, gray light crept through the snow-packed flaps of his shelter. Outside, the world was silent, buried, but calm. Inside, a fragile heartbeat pulsed stronger than before. The woman stirred again, this time with more awareness. Her lips moved. "Where am I?" Eli leaned forward, gently lifting her head to sip warm water from a tin cup. "You're safe," he said. "You were in an accident. I found your car yesterday." She blinked slowly, taking in her surroundings, the modest shelter, the gear stacked in corners, the strange man watching her with cautious concern. "You carried me?" He nodded. She was silent for a long time, then whispered, "Thank you." Eli shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. We've still got to get you out of here." But even as he said it, a strange warmth bloomed in his chest. Something about the way she looked at him, something raw and real, made the storm outside feel like a distant echo. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But he knew he wasn't alone anymore. And that changed everything. The snow hadn't let up enough for a real evacuation, so Eli did what he always did in uncertain situations, he adapted. Over the next 2 days, he turned his makeshift camp into a sanctuary for two. He reinforced the shelter with branches and canvas, dug out the stove's vent, and made room for his unexpected guest to recover. She remained weak, drifting in and out of sleep, but her eyes grew sharper each time they opened. On the third morning, the snow had stilled into a quiet hush. Light filtered through the pines and fractured beams, and the world looked like it had been dipped in silver. The woman stirred and sat up slowly, her limbs shaky but her voice clearer than before. Where are we?" she asked, her gaze sweeping over the compact space. Eli knelt beside the stove, boiling snow into water. He looked up, offered a soft, reassuring smile. "A few miles north of Raven Trail. You crashed just off the ridge line. I was camping nearby when I saw your car." She blinked, nodding slowly as fragments of memory returned. "There was a deer," she murmured. "It came out of nowhere. I swerved. Everything spun. Your car was nearly buried when I found it," Eli said, handing her a steaming tin cup. "You were lucky." She sipped slowly, wincing at the heat. "What's your name?" "Eli. I'm Mira." The name felt strange on her tongue, like she hadn't used it in a long time. She didn't offer a last name, and Eli didn't press. They sat in silence for a while, the crackling of the tiny stove between them. Mira examined the borrowed clothes she wore, thick wool socks several sizes too big, a patched flannel shirt, and thermal leggings tucked beneath 2 blankets. "You gave me your jacket. You needed it more. You stayed here with me. This whole time?" Eli nodded, poking at the embers. "Didn't seem right to leave." Something passed over her face, something unspoken. Gratitude, maybe. Or disbelief. Outside, the pine forests stood like ancient sentinels, quiet and still. Snow dripped from the needles in rhythmic taps. Mira shifted slowly, testing her legs. They worked, but barely. Eli offered a steadying hand. She took it. By that evening, Mira could stand and move around a little. Eli prepared a meal from his remaining supplies, dried lentils, rice, and a few slivers of jerky boiled into a stew. He handed her the bowl without ceremony, but she looked at it like it was gourmet. "I haven't eaten something this warm in. I don't even know." "Not 5-star, he said, half apologizing. "It's perfect," she replied. And meant it. The two of them sat close near the stove, the shelter dimly lit by the last rays of day in the soft orange glow of the fire. Mira leaned back and let out a shaky sigh. "You're not from around here," she said. "Just passing through," Eli replied. "Been on the road a few years now. Cities, woods, mountains. Wherever the wind goes." Mira tilted her head. "Why?" He considered that for a long moment. "Because staying in one place started to feel like suffocating. Out here, there's no noise. No eyes. Just peace." She nodded slowly, but her eyes were distant, like she was somewhere far away. "And you?" Eli asked, not unkindly. "Why were you out here alone?" Mira hesitated. Her voice was steady when she finally spoke, but her words were careful. "Work. I was inspecting land. For a development company." He didn't press further. Something about her tone told him she wasn't used to revealing much. Eli respected that. Trust wasn't something given, it was earned. Later that night, as a fresh breeze whispered through the cracks in the tarp, Mira lay beneath the sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling of branches and canvas. Eli sat nearby, carving something into a piece of pine bark with his pocket knife. "You really stayed with me the whole time?" "Yeah. And you didn't. I mean, you could have taken my things. Left me." Eli paused his carving. Looked over. "I'm not that kind of man." Silence stretched between them. Heavy. Real. Mira turned her head toward him. "Thank you." He gave a nod, returned to carving. The next day, the snow melted just enough for Eli to guide Mira a little down the ridge, to a clearing with a better view. From there, they could see the edge of the valley, and, far in the distance, the vague shape of a service road. "If the weather holds, we might see a ranger patrol in the next day or two," Eli said. "I don't want to go yet," Mira whispered. He glanced over. "You're still healing." She shook her head. "That's not what I meant." She didn't elaborate, and Eli didn't ask. But the air between them shifted, warmer, closer. That night, the wind picked up again. Not a blizzard this time, but enough to make the trees groan. Mira lay awake, trembling despite the layers. "You cold again?" Eli asked from the other side of the shelter. She nodded. "A little. My head hurts." He reached over, felt her forehead. "Warm. Too warm." "Damn," he muttered. "You've got a fever." He brewed more water, handed her a painkiller from his first aid kit, and fumbled through his gear for anything, more insulated. "You need body heat," he said quietly. "Direct transfer. I learned that in wilderness training. Mira looked at him, not frightened, just uncertain. I trust you, she said. Eli slid into the sleeping bag beside her once more, wrapping his arms around her gently, his body curved around hers. She didn't resist. Her breathing slowed. She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. "You'll be okay," he whispered. And in that small, fragile world built of snow and survival, something began to grow, tender, silent, and strong. Two people. Two lives. Two stories that had no business intersecting. And yet, against all odds, they had. 3 days after the snow began to melt, a chopper broke through the dawn sky, blades slicing the air like a warning. Eli stood at the edge of the clearing, one hand shielding his eyes as the sleek rescue craft hovered and lowered itself onto the snow-flattened pines. Mira was bundled inside the shelter, her cheeks pink again, her energy returning in careful increments. When she heard the hum, her breath caught. "They found us," she said. Eli nodded but didn't smile. He helped her stand, her arm around his shoulder, her boots still a size too big. When the rescue crew arrived, faces hidden behind tinted goggles and uniforms stamped with a private medical insignia, they swarmed her with gentle urgency. One of them looked at Eli briefly and gave a nod of thanks, but that was it. Mira turned to Eli as they strapped her into a stretcher. "I'll find you," she said. He blinked. "You don't have to." "I will." Her voice held no doubt. But before she could say more, the wind of the rotor blades took her voice away. She was lifted into the helicopter and vanished into the gray horizon. Eli was left behind, backpack slung over one shoulder, snowflakes settling in his hair. The silence afterward was louder than the storm had ever been. Back in the city, Mira was no longer Mira. She became Mirabelle Langston, the daughter of Brenton Langston, the head of Langston and Royce Holdings, a global real estate empire. Heiress. Public figure. Tabloid magnate. She returned to her world of marble floors, sensor-lit hallways, and polished assistant smiles, but something in her had shifted. The glass and steel fortress of her life now felt hollow, echoing with questions. The board demanded reports. Her mother demanded discretion. Her father demanded silence. "I was nearly killed," she said to them all. That should matter. They didn't listen. They only cared that she had survived without ruining the family name. But she couldn't focus, not on briefings, not on project launches, not even on the pending Aspen Ridge Resort acquisition. Her thoughts kept drifting to the man in the woods, the one with the quiet voice and steady hands, who asked for nothing and gave everything. Eli. She didn't even know his full name. So, she began to look. Quietly at first. Then obsessively. She skipped meetings to scan rescue records, reviewed ranger logs, and requested footage from remote highway surveillance. Her assistant, Sasha, stared in disbelief when she canceled a gala to visit a hiking permit registry 3 towns over. "Mirabelle, people are asking questions. Let them ask," she snapped. But the walls were closing in. Her parents noticed her erratic behavior. Executives whispered. One evening, her father cornered her in the library. "Whatever happened out there, it's over. You owe it to this family to move on." "I owe it to the man who saved me to find him." "He's a ghost," her father said coldly. "You don't even know who he is." "Wrong," she replied. "I know exactly who he is. You just don't like what he isn't." That night, she made her final move. She tracked a supply order made at a ranger post near the rescue zone. It had been signed in simple block letters, E. Thorne. She followed the trail. Eli, meanwhile, had returned to his rhythm. Back to walking trails that disappeared into pines, back to sleeping under stars, back to the quiet. But everything felt different now. The mountains still whispered, but Myra's voice echoed louder in his memory. Then came the envelope. It arrived by courier in a small-town diner where Eli was eating stew from a chipped bowl. 2 men in dark suits approached, their expressions unreadable. "Eli Thorne?" one asked. He nodded slowly. The man handed him a sleek envelope. A token of appreciation. Inside was a stack of $100 bills. Thick. Clean. More money than Eli had touched in 5 years. He closed the envelope and looked up. "Who sent this?" The men exchanged glances. A benefactor. Someone grateful. But also someone concerned. "Miss Langston's world is fragile." Eli's stomach sank. "You're being offered this to step away," the man continued. "No threats. No harm. Just an understanding. I'm not for sale." "No one said you were? But sometimes walking away is the most generous thing." Eli stood, jaw clenched. "Tell her." "Actually, no. Don't tell her anything. Just leave. He left the envelope on the table and walked out into the dusk. But that wasn't the end. For days, Eli noticed them, the car idling too long across the street, the man pretending to tie his boot every time he walked past, the hotel clerk who suddenly stopped meeting his eye. And then one night, it happened. Eli was walking back from a supply run, the sun already dipping behind the hills, when three men stepped out from behind a delivery truck. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were cold. "You were warned," one said. Eli didn't speak. He turned, ready to run, but another blocked the alley behind him. The first punch hit his ribs, sharp and sudden. The second caught his jaw. He staggered, caught off guard, tried to fight, but they moved fast, coordinated. He collapsed to the ground, groaning, blood on his lip and gravel in his palm. "Men like you," one of them hissed, grabbing his jacket, "don't get women like her. You think this is some fairy tale?" The screech of tires silenced everything. A silver car halted at the mouth of the alley. The door flung open, and a woman stormed out, hair wild, coat flying behind her. "Stop." Her voice cut through the cold like lightning. Mira ran, dropped to her knees beside Eli. "Touch him again," she said, her voice shaking with fury, "and I will end everything you work for." The men froze. Backed off. One of them cursed under his breath, then disappeared into the shadows. Eli coughed, eyes wide with disbelief. "Mira?" She nodded, tears already welling. "I found you." He stared at her. The way her coat fluttered. The way her breath came in clouds. She looked like a storm herself. Fierce. Alive. "I'm sorry," she whispered, cradling his bruised face. "I didn't know they'd come after you. I needed to find you." He didn't speak. He couldn't. "I should have told you who I was," she continued. "I was scared. But I'm not anymore. I'm here. And I'm not leaving without you." For the first time in weeks, Eli felt something settle in his chest. Something still. Something like home. Snow had begun to fall again. Heavy. Silent. Wrapping the alley in white. Mira pulled him closer. "You're not a ghost," she said. "You're real. And I'm not letting you disappear." Eli blinked away the blood and snow from his lashes. They nodded. "Neither am I." They didn't expect the world to care so much. Within 24 hours of Mira rescuing Eli from that alley, the news exploded. Photos snapped by someone from a nearby window, of her cradling him in the snow, of their bruised faces pressed close, hit every digital front page. Langston Heiress and Mystery Man, secret romance revealed. That was only the beginning. By the end of the week, they were everywhere. Talk shows, blogs, business magazines, even late-night monologues. Everyone had an opinion. Half of them ridiculed. The other half speculated. Eli, who had lived quietly for most of his life, was now an unwilling celebrity. The headlines never got his name right. Drifter. Backwoods loner. Mountain ghost. And Mira? She was dissected under a microscope. Langston legacy in jeopardy. Emotional instability or rebellion? Heiress falls for wilderness stranger, is the company safe? Inside the Langston penthouse, the mood was ice. "You are throwing away decades of legacy," her mother hissed over a crystal flute of something expensive. Her father's voice was worse, not loud, but cold. "You were raised to lead, Mira. You weren't raised to chase after this." Mira sat calmly at the edge of the long, polished table, her eyes steady. "He saved my life. I owe him everything." Her mother scoffed. "You owe this family. Do you even understand what you're risking?" Mira's voice didn't rise. It deepened. Hardened. "I understand exactly. That's why I'm choosing him." Stunned silence followed. Her father looked at her like he didn't recognize her. Her mother blinked, speechless for the first time in years. Mira stood up. "You built a name, yes. But you didn't build me. I did. And I decide who I give my life to." She walked out before either of them could respond. Eli stayed at Mira's loft for a while. It was quiet, minimal, full of books and soft lighting. She rarely stayed there herself, too sterile, she said, but with him, it began to feel like something warmer. They cooked together. Talked late into the night. Sat on the floor with mugs of tea and no TV. They created a bubble, soft and fragile, away from the flashbulbs and judgment. But Eli was cracking. He wore the suits Mira's assistant picked out. Attended charity luncheons. Smiled at camera flashes. But beneath the surface, he felt like a mannequin. The man who once slept beneath stars was now choking in velvet halls. He didn't say anything to Mira, never wanted her to think he regretted staying, but she noticed. Every time someone asked which firm he was with or mistook him for her bodyguard, he flinched. Every time a paparazzi shouted his name, wrong or not, he shrank. It all came to a head at the Langston Foundation's annual gala. The ballroom glimmered like a dream, crystal chandeliers, imported orchids, soft piano music. Mira wore a sapphire gown that caught the light with every step. She was radiant. Powerful. But Eli stood against the wall, lost in a sea of champagne flutes and sharp suits. Someone approached him. Another executive. Another stranger with a smile too sharp. "So," the man said, swirling his drink. "You from Silverhawk? You look like one of theirs. West Coast firm, right?" Eli blinked. "I'm not with a firm." The man laughed. "Oh, sorry. You're with press then? Or, security?" Eli didn't answer. He turned, walked straight out of the ballroom, and didn't stop. The rain had started. That soft, misting kind that makes the city blur. Eli's tie was half loosened, his coat collar flipped up. He walked aimlessly through the streets, past windows glowing with warm yellow light and reflections of people who belonged. He didn't. He paused at a bench in a small park near the river, the kind where no one sat this late. He ran a hand through his damp hair. This life, this world, it wasn't made for him. And he couldn't keep pretending. He wasn't good enough for Mira. Not here. Footsteps broke through the quiet. Eli. He turned. Mira was running down the sidewalk, heels clicking, gown soaked, hair tangled from the rain. Her mascara streaked like war paint, but her eyes were fire. "What are you doing?" she gasped, stopping in front of him. "I don't belong in your world," he said, voice low. "You know it. I know it. I don't want that world without you," she shot back. He looked away. "I don't know how to be what you need. You already are." She stepped closer. "I'd rather live in a tent in the woods with you than wear another mask at another gala. Don't you get it?" She reached out, her hands gripping his. "I love you. I don't care what people say. Let them whisper. Let them mock. We don't need them." Eli searched her eyes, still not fully believing. "I'd give it all up," she said, tears mixing with rain. "All of it. For a fire in a cabin. For you." He didn't say anything. Just pulled her close, arms around her waist, their foreheads touching under the lamplight. "I've got you," he whispered. And for the first time in days, the weight lifted. They left the next morning. No headlines. No press release. Just two people, two backpacks, and a truck headed north. Back to the mountains. But this time, not to hide. To build. They called it Heartland, a community initiative that prioritized sustainable tourism and cultural preservation. A place where local families could teach, earn, and share without being overrun by luxury. Eli brought the vision. Mira brought the resources. Together, they brought the heart. They met with elders from the mountain villages, learned about local traditions, planted roots. They didn't arrive with handouts, they arrived with notebooks, open ears, and calloused hands. Mira stepped down from her executive role at Langston & Royce. The media lost its mind. Stock dropped briefly. But she didn't flinch. "I'm not walking away," she told reporters. "I'm walking toward something better." And she meant it. They helped build eco-lodges, funded schools, restored walking trails. They trained guides from the local youth. Replaced concrete with carved wood. Imported silence instead of noise. Eli taught wilderness survival to at-risk teens. Mira mentored young women who never believed their voice could matter. And through it all, their love held steady. Not flashy. Not loud. Just true. 1 year later, they hosted the first Lantern Festival in Heartland. Hundreds of villagers and travelers lit candles and sent paper lanterns into the mountain sky, each one a prayer, a wish, a promise. Mira stood barefoot in the square, her hair braided with red thread gifted by the children. Eli stepped forward, heart racing. He dropped to one knee, held up a simple ring, silver, etched with a mountain and a fire. "I never thought I'd find you," he said, voice steady. "But I did. You changed my life. And I want to keep building it, with you." Mira's hands flew to her mouth, tears already falling. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. And above them, the lanterns danced, tiny suns over the village they had made their own. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting long, golden shadows that danced across the timber walls. Outside, a thick snowfall blanketed the world in silence, coating the pines, the roof, and the winding trail leading into the valley below. The wind whispered through the trees like a lullaby, soft and steady, wrapping the small wooden cabin in a blanket of peace. Inside, Mira sat curled in a cushioned armchair, her legs wrapped in a wool blanket, a notebook resting across the swell of her belly. One hand moved with gentle care as she scribbled something slow and purposeful. The other rested on her stomach, fingers moving in soothing circles, as if the child inside could feel her thoughts taking shape. Her hair was longer now, often tied in a simple braid. Her clothes no longer came from catalogs or personal stylists, they were handmade by the village women who'd taught her to weave, to stitch, to live with her hands instead of a company credit card. The words in her notebook weren't for business. Not a speech. Not a memoir. Just a letter. To the woman she had been. The girl who once thought skyscrapers defined success. The girl who once believed love was something fragile, easily lost, easily replaced. She was writing about the moment it all changed. The snow. The crash. The stranger who became everything. She paused, staring into the flames, as the door creaked open behind her. Eli stepped in, shaking off snow from his shoulders, his breath still visible in the air. He kicked off his boots by the door and peeled off his gloves, revealing calloused hands, streaked with mud and pine sap from his afternoon on the trail. His eyes immediately found hers, and his tired face softened into a smile. "You're still up?" he asked, voice warm with that mountain hush. "I'm writing," she said softly. "Trying to get it all down." He crossed the room in quiet strides, leaned down, and kissed the top of her head before settling on the ottoman beside her. "Our little one going for the gold again?" he asked, nodding toward her belly. "They haven't stopped moving all day," Mira laughed gently. "I think they take after you. Always restless. Let's hope they take your fire too." They sat in silence for a moment, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining in a rhythm that needed no words. This was home. Not the boardrooms. Not the city lights. Here, in the set of cinnamon tea, pine logs, and snowy nights. In the year since their engagement, Heartland had blossomed. What had begun as a shared dream during a snowstorm had evolved into a thriving community, a movement. Word spread far beyond the mountain range. Journalists came, not for scandal, but to write stories about resilience. Families arrived not as tourists, but as students, eager to learn from the land and the people who lived close to it. Mira, once heir to a billion-dollar real estate empire, had become something else entirely. She stepped back from the global spotlight but stood tall in village classrooms, teaching children how to think boldly, how to imagine futures rooted in their own soil. She used her name not as a shield, but as a door, for others. Scholarships for girls from mountain villages. Microloans for women artisans. Medical supplies for remote communities. She found fulfillment not in quarterly growth, but in watching a grandmother smile as her hand-woven cloths found a market far beyond the village. Eli became legend among the youth. "The man from the storm," they whispered. He taught survival workshops, guided treks, and led night walks through forest trails lit only by moonlight and old stories. He rarely spoke of how he'd met Mira, but everyone seemed to know anyway. Their story had soaked into the roots of Heartland like rainwater, quiet, essential. Sometimes, when he looked out across the valley at dusk, he wondered how everything had changed so quickly. And then he'd see her, on a porch swing, or tending the garden, or laughing with children in the village square, and he knew. It hadn't changed quickly. It had always been waiting. They just had to find it. One snowy evening, as the wind tapped gently against the windows, Mira rested her head on Eli's shoulder. A lull settled over them, that unique hush only winter brings. She tilted her head to look at him. "Do you remember the night I said I'd trusted you?" she asked quietly. "In the shelter," he said with a nod. "Yeah. I didn't know who you were. Not your name. Not your past. Just your presence." He turned toward her, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "And I didn't know who you were either. Not the money. Not the company. Just the woman shivering in the snow who somehow made me feel like I had something to live for again." Mira smiled, her eyes glassy with emotion. "We were strangers," she said. "And now? We're a story," he finished, leaning in to kiss her forehead. She pressed the notebook into his hands. "Will you read it?" Eli opened the cover and skimmed the first few lines. His throat tightened. "To the woman I used to be," it began. "The one who chased cold towers and lost her way. This is the story of how the storm didn't break you. It brought you home." He closed it gently, placed it on the table beside them, and whispered, "It's beautiful. Just like you." The baby arrived in spring. A soft morning. Mist curling over the fields. The valley blooming with wildflowers. The village midwife delivered the child with gentle hands, while Mira gripped Eli's arm and whispered through every contraction, "I can do this. We can do this." And they did. A little girl. Hair as dark as Eli's. Eyes like Myra's, full of knowing. They named her Celine, which in the old tongue meant sun after snow. The village celebrated with drums, laughter, and fires that burned all night. Years passed. Heartland grew, not in size, but in soul. New families arrived. More schools were built. New trails were opened, always with respect to the earth. The mountains were no longer a place to conquer, but a place to learn, to grow, to remember. Celine grew up chasing fireflies, learning to fish from Eli, and spinning stories with Mira. She never questioned where home was. She could feel it in the earth beneath her bare feet. And every year, when the snow returned, Mira would sit with Celine by the fire, and tell the story again. Of a woman lost in a storm. Of a man who gave without asking. Of a love that didn't just survive, it thrived. On the 10th anniversary of the night they met, Eli built a bench beneath the tallest pine, the one that overlooked the entire valley. He carved something into the wood before he called Mira over. When she saw it, she couldn't speak for a moment. Still here. Still home. Still us. She wrapped her arms around him and whispered, always. And so, the story that began with frost and fear ended in warmth and wonder. It wasn't just a love story. It was a story of rebirth, of choice, of building something new from the ashes of the old. It reminded everyone who heard it that love isn't always loud or perfect. Sometimes, love is just a hand reaching out in the snow. A whisper in the cold. And the quiet promise. You are not alone.